The chilling case of Mary Bell. At just 11 years old, Mary Bell shocked Britain with crimes so disturbing they seemed impossible for a child. What could drive someone so young to murder? Tonight, we uncover the dark secrets behind the girl they called a child killer. Mary Flora Bell was born on May 26, 1957, in the village of Corbridge, County Northumberland, England. Her mother, Elizabeth Betty McCricket, was a prostitute from a young age, and by the age of 17 she gave birth to Mary, without really knowing from whom. The girl was not Betty's first child. Nevertheless, there is very little information about the firstborn in free sources, and it is little Mary who interests us in this story. Shortly after the birth of her daughter, Betty moved to the city and married an alcoholic, William Billy Bell, who became little Mary's stepfather and gave her his last name. For a long time, the girl considered that Billy was his father. The man was not an exemplary stepfather, as he often took a sip of the bottle and spread his hands, and soon he was sentenced to several years for assault. So Betty was left alone with her children again. Taking care of little Mary weighed heavily on the young mother. Therefore, during the first years of her life, she tried several times to get rid of it. Officially, all these incidents were recorded as accidents, but Betty's relatives were always sure that it was her mother who was responsible for all these oversight. When Mary was not even 2 years old, she fell out of a second-floor window, and her mother claimed that the girl herself climbed onto the windowsill and jumped down. A little later, Mary was hospitalized with an overdose of sleeping pills, and this time, Betty said that her daughter had taken the medicine on her own while she wasn't looking. When the baby was about 3 years old, Betty tried to sell her child to a mentally unstable woman who could not have children of her own. It was only by a miracle that Betty's sister Catherine was able to find the girl and bring her home. Another of Betty's sisters, Isa, said that after Mary was born, her mother was outraged when her daughter was brought to her. She was screaming, "Get that away from me!" And Betty's relatives repeatedly offered the girl to give the children into their care. But there was already a plan in the girl's head for how she could benefit from her little daughter. In the mid-1960s, Betty began allowing her clients to use her daughter at sadomasochistic meetings. Mary's mother would personally blindfold her daughter with a stocking and then wring her hands, offering her child's body for monstrous abundance. Unsurprisingly, when Mary entered school, others noticed her unstable behavior. The girl often had sudden mood swings, and she was especially hurt for her chronic urinary incontinence. At first, peers scoffed at this problem, but soon, Mary started fighting back. She fought with both boys and girls. Mary repeatedly tried to strangle some of her classmates. An enraged girl tried to stuff sand into her mouth and throat so that she would suffocate. The frightened children didn't want to get involved with Mary anymore. Therefore, if they saw that the girl was beginning to show alarming signs, shaking her head, they immediately tried to get out of her field of vision. One of the classmates later shared with the media that Mary Bell, before attacking, began to drill the alleged victim with a cold, steely gaze, and it was always a wake-up call for them. After all of the above incidents, the children completely stopped communicating with Mary, so she was a loner for several years. It wasn't until early 1967 that the girl found a kindred spirit, and she turned out to be the 13-year-old daughter of the Bell family's neighbors, a namesake, Norma Joyce Bell, born 1955. In their friendship, Mary was the leader, and Norma was the lead, and if you believe the sources, then the last girl had a developmental delay, which at least explains why she became friends with Mary and followed all her instructions. At first, the girls simply led a vagabond lifestyle, wandering around abandoned buildings and seedy places. But soon Mary seemed to go off the rails. On Saturday, May 11, 1968, near St. Margaret Street in Scotswood, random people met a 3-year-old boy wandering and confused. The child was bleeding profusely. Therefore, concerned citizens called an ambulance and the police. When the boy was helped, he said that that morning he was playing with 2 girls, Mary and Norma, on the roof of an abandoned bomb shelter, and one of the girls pushed him off the roof. The height was about 2 meters, but he didn't know exactly who it was. The baby suffered a serious head injury. Therefore, the police, having found out the identities of the girlfriends, were already about to go to them. But literally from the threshold, the officers were stopped by the parents of other children. They said that Mary Bell and Norma Bell tried to strangle their daughters playing in the sandbox. This was the second attack of the day. Therefore, the police immediately went to both participants of the crimes. Both girls denied any involvement in these incidents, saying that they found the boy already bleeding, and this is the first time they've ever heard of girls. However, soon Norma confessed that it was Mary who strangled the girls. Norma said, "She went up to one of the girls and asked, as if into the void, 'What happens if you strangle someone?' And then she wrapped her arms around the neck of one of them and started squeezing. After the girl turned completely blue, I asked Mary to stop, and she turned her attention to the second girl, doing the same to her. This time, Mary and Norma got off with just a warning, since their age did not allow for a more severe punishment to be applied to their actions, and soon this omission led to irreparable consequences. In the 1960s, in some areas of the city, Newcastle upon Tyne has implemented a project to renovate/improve the city. The terraced slums were being demolished. Comfortable and modern houses and apartments were built in their place. Due to the fact that people were quickly resettled, some houses remained abandoned for a long time. It was in one of these houses, on May 25, 1968, at about 3:30 p.m., that the body of 4-year-old Martin Brown was discovered. The boy was lying in the bedroom on the top floor, and his arms were stretched above his head. There were moles on Martin's face and foam around his mouth. Otherwise, no other signs of violence were found on the child's body. Martin was discovered by 3 children who immediately rushed for help, and John Hall, a local handyman, was the first to arrive. While the man was performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation on Martin, Mary and Norma entered the bedroom, asking about what had happened here. The adults who arrived escorted the girls out, and they went to the house of Martin's aunt, Rita Finley, where they reported that her nephew had died from an accident. The next day, the girls entered one of the kindergartens and started a pogrom there. In addition to the physical damage, the police managed to find 4 notes in which the vandals wrote about their involvement in Martin's murder, but without their names, of course. The police took this incident as a stupid joke, so they did not focus on the terrible recordings. On May 29, 1968, the day of little Martin's funeral, Mary and Norma came to his mother June's house to ask her to see her son. The woman tried to explain to the girls that the child was gone. Mary stopped her and said, "Yes, I know. I want to see him in his coffin." At that time, June Richardson did not pay attention to this situation, and she won't remember it until a few months later. No one had any suspicions about the girls, so they could have gotten away with murdering Martin Brown if Mary had been able to stop. But alas, we're talking about a serial killer. On the evening of July 31, 1968, 3-year-old Brian Howe was playing outside near his house with his sister and her friends, Mary and Norma. A few hours later, Brian's sister came home saying she had lost him, and already at 23:10, search engines found the boy's body between 2 concrete blocks in a vacant lot. When the police arrived, they noticed bruises and abrasions on the child's neck, and also the scratches near the nose. Next to the body were broken scissors, with which the killer cut out the letter M on Brian's stomach, cut off a lock of hair, and mutilated the genitals. Mechanical asphyxia was found to be the cause of the abrasion. Moreover, the coroner found that the perpetrator tried to kill the child by covering his nose and mouth at the same time, and when he couldn't, he started strangling Brian. The discovery of the body of a 3-year-old kid raised the whole city's ears. People demanded to find the culprit. Therefore, more than 100 detectives were involved in the search for the killer. By August 2nd, more than 1,200 children had been questioned. Norma and Mary were among them. Mary was completely calm during the interrogation. She didn't deny that she was playing with Brian that night, but, according to her, after that, an 8-year-old boy came up to them and also started playing with Brian. Mary mentioned that he had a small pair of scissors with which he tried to cut off the cat's tail. The girl also mentioned one very important detail which gave her away. Mary said that one of the legs of the scissors was bent, and only the police and Pretupnik himself knew about this little thing. The detective went to the named 8-year-old boy to finally convince himself of Mary's guilt, and his parents reported that he was at Newcastle Airport that day. The alibi was confirmed by numerous witnesses, and Mary Bell and Norma Bell became the main suspects in this case. Norma was very agitated during the interrogation. The girl denied any involvement, but the detectives understood that it was necessary to crack it. And already on August 4th, 1968, Norma's parents informed the police that their daughter was ready to confess everything. Norma Bell said that on July 31st, Mary took her to a vacant lot and showed her Brian's body. She told Norma in vivid detail how she had stitched up the baby, and then she showed me the razor blade and scissors she used to drop the baby's body. Norma took the police to the crime scene and showed them where the blade was hidden. And when she returned to the police station, she drew from memory the wounds of the boy she had seen that day. Everything matched. Mary was summoned for questioning on August 5th, and this time she was especially aggressive. The girl tried to testify, but her versions constantly varied. Therefore, she refused to speak until she was provided with a lawyer. On the same day, she was re-interrogated and standard. Only this time she wasn't pretending to be a white sheep anymore. The girl confessed that she was present at the murder of Brian. May, as Norma called her friend, seemed to have lost her mind. She pushed Brian onto the grass and started strangling him. She told me to get down to business too, but I ran away, and she came back when it was all over. Criminologists managed to find on the clothes Brian has different fibers, and some of them matched the fibers of Mary's woolen dress, and some of them matched the fibers of Norma's burgundy skirt. Despite Norma's confessions, the girls were not arrested immediately, and Mary even managed to attend Brian's funeral on August 7th. Chief Inspector Dobson recalled, "She was standing right outside the Howe family home when the coffin was being carried out. She laughed and rubbed her hands. I knew I had to put her away. Otherwise, she'll kill someone again." On the same day, both girls were formally charged with the murder of Brian Howe. And if Norma sobbed at what she heard, Mary just said, "Well, okay, everything is fine with me." During the interrogation, Mary confessed in writing to the pogrom of the kindergarten, and also that she was present at the murders of Martin and Brian. She named her friend Norma as the main culprit. The psychological and psychiatric examination concluded that Norma was 6 to 7 years behind in mental development. She was a submissive, easily emotional girl, but nevertheless she could distinguish the bad from the good. But Mary suffered from a psychopathic personality disorder. She was sane, but at the same time the disorder brought its own peculiarities to her psyche. The girl was a manipulative, cunning, and aggressive child. She was very smart but prone to sudden mood swings. She was capable of murder. On December 5th, 1968, both girls appeared before a jury, and despite the fact that the lawyers requested complete anonymity for them due to their minor age, the court refused their request. According to Judge Sir Ralph Cusack, people should have known the heroes by sight. Therefore, the journalists were given the go-ahead to publish the names, ages, photographs of the defendants, and details of their deeds. Mary's lawyer did not deny her involvement, but he also insisted that both girls should be equally responsible for the fact that there was collusion between them, and also for the fact that they killed together. Meanwhile, Norma's defense denied any involvement of the girl. Her parents testified against Mary at the trial. Norma's mother said that shortly before the murders, Mary tried to strangle their youngest daughter, Susan. Catherine Bell said that it was only when her husband approached Mary and hit her on the shoulder that she released her grip on the girl's throat. On December 17, 1968, the jury, after 3 hours of deliberation, issued a decision acquitting Norma Bell on all counts. But Mary was found guilty of the manslaughter of 2 boys. Before pronouncing the verdict, Judge Cusack said that Mary needed to be protected from society, as she was a dangerous and violent person who could take many more lives. As a result, 11-year-old Mary Bell was sentenced to indefinite imprisonment at the discretion of Her Majesty. While in the correctional facility, Mary complained several times about sexual abuse by staff and other prisoners. Therefore, in November 1973, she was transferred to the secure wing of the Style prison. In September 1977, Mary and several other prisoners escaped from prison. It was only in September that she was caught and returned to custody. The punishment was the cancellation of privileges for 28 days. In May 1980, 23-year-old Mary was released. She was given a new identity and complete anonymity. Therefore, the girl was able to start life from scratch. On May 25, 1984, Mary had a daughter who knew nothing about her mother's past. It wasn't until 1998 that reporters managed to declassify Mary, who lives with her daughter on the Sussex coast. Fearing reprisals, Mary left her home and filed a lawsuit in the Supreme Court on the extension of anonymity. The fact is that the previous decision to grant anonymity extended only for 10 years. She won the trial. Therefore, on May 21, 2003, Bell received lifelong anonymity for herself and her child. And before disappearing again, Mary gave an interview to the writer Gitta Sereni. The woman spoke about her abusive childhood and explained that it was still not an excuse for her crimes, but at least it can show where the legs of her fractured psyche grew from.